Welcome, friends and fellow entrepreneurial teachers. I am excited to chat today with another one of my fellow Antinet Zettelkasten friends who is also embarking on their entrepreneurial teaching journey. Tyson J. Hayes is a longtime entrepreneurial teacher and is on the cusp of his solopreneur journey, helping mentor others, especially young men, and helping people figure out how to have a positive impact on the world around them. We've also found through conversations that we have a lot in common, both being homeschool families, Dungeons and Dragons enthusiasts, and also really passionate lifelong learners, which is how we both ended up in the Scott Shepherd group. So, as a quick kind of framing for our audience, Tyson, what do you love to teach and to share with others?
So, what I love teaching the most is probably how to find not only find yourself, but then figure out that positive impact, like you said. So, a lot of the people I end up working with tend to end up being kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing, or kind of younger in career, younger people, and getting them to kind of not just think like, oh, I'm looking for that next job, that next thing. My favorite question to ask people is not, when I get an answer to it is like, well, I want to be a sysadmin. I want to do what you do. I'm like, great. What are you doing for the 45 years after that point? Because you're going to get to that in about 2 years. So what then? And then to see kind of that conversation that spawns out of that, of them kind of like stepping back going, oh dear God, I don't know. And then that's when the fun conversations kind of start. So in short, I just kind of enjoy teaching. How do you find yourself? How do you challenge yourself in those big questions? And the conversation of like legacy around kind of like, what is that you're ultimately end up leaving behind, and that impacts in the world. So in short.
Yeah, those are big
Yeah,
questions and
not yeah,
important
nothing
questions.
small.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely not questions that we're really taught to ask ourselves in any formal education. So it's
Oh dear
important
God, no.
that there are people out there, that are helping guide us to think about those things. So, how did you end up here? How did you end up interested in this, doing this? Where did it all come from?
So I don't know if we ever really had a moment of kind of like, oh, I realized I'm interested in this thing. I teach by default. You and I've talked enough where I will start just being like, let me tell you about this thing that I've learned. And we'll start just kind of teaching everything about it. I can't even say that my concept of those legacy questions or even something I've discovered or came up with myself. It's really borrowing from the 7 steps of highly successful people. Start with the end in mind, in the late and then borrowing from Scott Shepherd's VLC. When I kind of walk you through my legacy, my kind of the legacy questions of kind of like, where do you want to go in your life or whatever, I'm really asking you your vision, your location, and your challenges. So really, I'm just taking all of these concepts, remashing them together, and figuring out how do I like talk to you, the individual. And as you know, we were talking before we turned the recording on, I'm really good at getting into those deep questions with people and really dialing into the person. And I've found through discussion of other fellow anti-netters, it might be just the way my brain kind of works, and I'm pulling in tons of information. I think, you've just got kind of self-described as an ADHD kind of person. You and I will start spinning each other off into the million different directions, because I will do the same thing with you. But it's our ability to pull in all of these things and notice like every subtle detail of a person's, the way their eye movements are, the way their mouth moves or whatever, and all that information, pulling it in, of just getting them just to the point of uncomfortability, and just kind of like just gently nudging them along. I forget where I'm lost my train of thought. It's already like early in the morning. My coffee's still kicking in, but I kind of can't help but do that with people, and trying to figure out. And the journey has been kind of like, how do I dial that back just enough to not push someone too hard, and then kind of figure out how do I get them to be their best selves, and give them, as my guys have described it as, I'm like the bumpers on a bowling alley. You can't actually gutter it out. I give you just enough room to feel like you can kind of have some freedom of movement in what you're doing, but I won't let you actually fail. And it's figuring out, how do I do that with every person I meet, and then get paid to do it, because that's ultimately my goal. Because I like my day job, but man, I love doing this way more.
Yeah, I really like that the bumper description because that
Oh, for
is
sure, right?
yeah, yeah. And when we're a teacher, that's kind of that fine line that we're trying to walk because you can't do it all for them. They have to get the bumps and bruises themselves or they're never going to learn. But at the same time, you're trying to keep it from going too far off the rails where they end up doing some sort of permanent damage to who they have the potential to become. And obviously always trying to shortcut it a little bit for them so maybe they can get there hopefully a little bit faster than we got there ourselves. I think that's every teacher's goal, is to help people. Just what a good teacher's goal. I know my teacher through the martial arts, as we came up, he always told us repeatedly that his ultimate goal was to train us to be better than him one day. And a
Hmm.
true teacher, that's what they're looking to do, is they are hoping that their student is going to outshine them someday. And I have met a lot of teachers who aren't capable of that, probably because they haven't grappled with a lot of the questions that you ask people.
I think of it as kind of um so I've studied Kyokushin many years ago. I never got very far. I'm nowhere near like any level of mastery, but when we would do actually live sparring and stuff, I would come out of it with my forearms completely, green and brown, kind of from like just from all the blocking and stuff. That's kind of how I think about it, right? Like you shouldn't be actively hurt, but should hurt enough to kind of leave just enough of a bruise to kind of forget you to really be paying attention. Like the questions should be just on the touch of uncomfortableness, but not enough where it's like you're actively being hurt. And yeah, no, I think of it as we have a joke at my around the office that we call it smooth brain. We're like sushi. Our brain's like sushi, right? So it should be in like putting wrinkles in your brain means I'm thinking too hard. So that's why I've jokingly called it my stuff like how to think like me, how to smooth brain your way to success, right? I should be able to teach you in such an easy way that you kind of just need to do the things and you will eventually start succeeding because you're just executing on the plans. It's but that's just kind of my joke.
Yeah, no, that's similar to the philosophy we have behind the momentum learning system. It should
Mm.
get easier. There's this kind of myth that, like getting your black belt should be super difficult, and those like final steps should be really, really hard, but it should actually get easier to learn. Like, yes, there may be more effort down the road, but once you've gotten through your first really 6 months to a year of training, you should have learned how to learn. And now you're just developing and refining skills. So it should get easier to learn the stuff, even if you're exerting your muscles more, you're having to think a little bit harder about the concepts, whether it's the martial arts or anything else, there should be this feeling of momentum where you get excited to dive in deeper rather than everything just being gruelingly hard, where you're coming out with all kinds of bumps and bruises or whatever. And there's definitely there's hard styles that have more of that. The Shaolin style that we train, it's like, how can we avoid that? How can we keep doing this until we're 80, 90 years old, which is not something you can do if you're getting punched in the head or beat up all the time. So it's just kind of finding that balance.
Well, you can't do it and still be have the life you want to be living. Uh, so I think about that too. So like I'm a hobbyist rock climber, right? I and I think about that when I'm climbing. I'm looking to push myself hard enough to keep the momentum going, but not so hard as to short my climbing career, because I'm planning on doing this into my 80s. And talking to guys I'm in the gym with, and they're like in their 30s or 40s, and they're like, "What do you mean you want to be doing this when you're 80?" I'm like, "How do you not?" I'm like just so confused by that concept. Like, no, we should be moving. We should be being in our bodies and doing things that ultimately allow us to live till we're like 100, 120. So when I think about legacy, right, and I think about kind of where am I at the end of my life, I have to choose an age that is so absolutely mind-boggling crazy to me that I'm going to be living that old, because of, you have to just to shortcut your to rob yourself of thinking about that, of like, oh, I'm going to die young. It doesn't get you anything. When I think about when I'm going to die, and when I wrote my own obituary at one point, I was like 130 and died with like a million grandchildren or something. It was like, which I even now, I'm turning 40 next year. I'm thinking about going, oh God, that would be just like, ugh, like I'm barely feel good in my body in some days right now. What am I doing, 100 years from now? And I'm like, hey, buddy, that's the idea. That's like, you have to be taking care of yourself. And if you're thinking of things, those kinds of long terms of dividends, like I don't know. I always love to you talk about your martial arts stuff, because you are thinking about that in your style, just like, how do you keep doing this? How do you keep growing? How do you uh, the circle? I'm sorry, I'm thinking of that your magnet you sent out about the your teachers and the kind of the three eights or something.
Yeah, the life spiral with the three
Life spiral.
circles.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I was like, I was so close to it. But kind of think about that. How do you kind of keep that number continuing to grow and that constant kind of movement? And I was very inspired by that when I read it, and I just couldn't remember the word life spiral, but I do end up thinking about it a lot, kind of like in just my day to day.
Awesome. I'm glad. And yeah, the Dr. Peter Attia, who's written a few books, he's kind of a longevity expert. He talks about the Centurion Olympics. So he thinks about what he wants to be able to do when he's 100 years old. So if he wants to be able to squat down and pick up his grandkids or get down on the floor and play with them, what's the actual physical load? So that means, being able to lift a 25-pound kettlebell and doing squats. So he kind of thinks backwards from that goal to what does he need to be doing now to make sure that his body has that sustained strength and durability to be able to still playing with his grandkids or great grandkids, when he's 100 years old. So it's that legacy and projecting into the future, and that can start to help us make better decisions in the moment, because it's when the cake is right in front of you and 100 years is many decades away, it's really hard to make the decision that's gonna help you, 60 years in the future.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me about cake, Stephanie. I've got plenty of cake all through here. It's fine. I'm I'm sorry, you said Centurion Olympics, and my immediate thought, because I'm just gonna share because you and I have similar brains, I immediately thought of some person rolling down down a track on a wheelchair, trying to doing a high jump, like where they just like vault off of their wheelchair and over a high jumping. Apparently, that's my brain this morning. So, like, buckle in. This is gonna be a fun 45 minutes.
All right, so going back to your journey and what got you here, did you have someone like you that kind of helped set you on this path, or was it more just like a confluence of influences that brought you here? But did you have like a Tyson that got you going?
No, and that's actually why I'm starting this. Is I didn't. I wanted a Tyson. I wanted someone to kind of like help me get out of my own way. It's one of the reasons I kind of talk about like mentoring young men in particular is not only wanting to have mentored myself when I was younger, but looking at my own son and thinking, how can I help you? How can I help you get out of your own way? How can I help you grow? So my core values, because you do not enough reading, you eventually have to kind of figure out like what is the things that I care about. And Brene Brown for me helped me kind of think through that in that way, mostly because she actually listed a bunch off and I got to go, oh, thank God, and started scratching stuff off, because the idea of like starting from nothing and creating my values just was like, oh my God, no. And then just kept putting it off for years. This is a long-winded way of getting to I care about wisdom and fatherhood in particular. So a lot of what I'm end up talking through ends up kind of coming through this lens of fatherhood. So like I have to, like when I'm working with people, I tend to end up kind of parenting them in a way. So I am kind of in a way, while I'm practicing parenting my own kid while working with my mentees or working with my clients, because it's just kind of ends up being like, well, how are you dealing with this? Okay, your father didn't show up this way. Okay, well, I mean, I'll be mentally making an adjustment, going, okay, don't do that. All right, don't leave my wife when my kid's 12. Well, check, that one wasn't hard. Like, things like that. But then kind of figure out how do I like bring that forward. So I was in a car accident when I was 16, 17. I had nothing, and but that set my life into motion of kind of like being very lost for a long time, because I had this brush with death, but then didn't know what to do with any of it and was kind of alone on my thoughts a lot. So I had to figure out who is it that I'm wanting to be, and it's been a long journey from that to try to figure out not only who I want to be, where am I going, but then what is it that I care about? What am I trying to put into this world? Because I know what it's like to kind of wake up literally in midair to, after being, because I was asleep at the time. I was in the passenger side, passenger side, and the car hit us from the driver. So I woke up literally in midair to kind of like, in this, and you can read about it in my Explosion of Noise newsletter and my podcast and stuff, where I'm talking through these things. But just kind of that brush with death kind of like then sets you on this path of like, well, what is it that I'm wanting? And not having anyone that could help me contain all of that energy and helped me figure out where it is that we go from here, and how do I deal with any of those emotions. So that's what I'm kind of looking to put back into the world. How do I help people deal with those big traumas, those big problems, and then kind of figure out how to make a positive impact into the rest of the world, and kind of be the person that they're wanting to be.
So you mentioned Brene Brown. Is that where you started from, or how, like, what were kind of the early influences as you moved through that process after the car accident? When did you start, when and how did you start, seeking out answers, and how did that journey unfold?
um I wish I could kind of point it back and say that like, oh, whatever, this, like, because I'm talking about like I was 16 when the car accident happened. And so I wish I could say, oh yeah, when I was in my 20s, I figured it out. But it was like it was a series of bad mistakes of kind of like I'm with partners that don't work out, and I'm kind of making, and I'm just floating through life. I think what kind of the catalyst for really wanting to drive my own change was actually my first kid, and kind of realizing like, oh, not only do I want to be a dad, which was the thing I realized many years beforehand, but then once I got him here, I was like, oh, I have to be a real person for you and figure out all my stuff to then help you figure out your stuff. So that's kind of when I started really paying attention to, well, what am I doing? How am I growing? And and all of that stuff. And but it wasn't really until like I almost got to Scott Shepard when he was kind of like, oh yeah, write all that stuff down. Then I was like that everything started just clicking a lot more, and things began to move a lot more like a lot faster, and kind of and really kind of building all this stuff up. So one of the things I remember we've talked to our mutual friend Terry, like I've been telling him is like, I'm very early on in this journey. So I look at all of you guys, like yourself and Haley and Mel and all the people around us that are, propelling themselves forward. Like I feel like I'm still in my infant steps when you all are like in baby steps when you guys are running. I know you're looking at me like, dude, we don't know what we're doing either. I'm like, I know, but it's like you guys have so much more of your story kind of like ready to go, like like almost at the ready in a way. Like I could talk to you. I've talked to you. You've talked about how you've started your martial art, your martial arts studios, and you've done Quester's Way, and you've like, I've made businesses, and I've made practically no money from any of them. But I'm looking at these journeys and like, well, I think I'm finally on something where I know this is going to ultimately pay off. So I feel like I'm just the cheerleader in the back, like the little little brother in the back, kind of going like, "We can do it, yay!" with all of you guys. Um, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Where was I going with this?
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, no, but that is I think it's an interesting thing that a lot of people feel that that there's kind of this almost imposter syndrome, and I think we've talked about this before in other conversations, but I mean your story is your whole life story. There's multiple things that led you to this. And
mhm,
there's always that magical thing where someone comes across it early and they get
mhm.
to jump in early. Like, I mean, I started the martial arts when I was 12. I don't think I actually figured myself out until I was in my 20s. But I got lucky and I did stumble into that. And then I'd like to eventually have Nicholas Cassian on here, Scott's little protege, who's this 17-year-old wonderkin who's already, building out his anti-net and developing AI programs and doing all kinds of amazing stuff. And we all look at him as 30, 40, 50-year olds and being like, oh, I wish I had started, taking notes and recording the way that we're recording now, using our anti-net to capture ideas and insights and then connect them together into something even newer and exciting. And he's doing this all so young. So there are those people that manage to stumble into it early in life, but I think
Mhm.
they're few and far between. They tend to get the most press, but I think most people are more like what you're talking about, where it took them the first few decades to stumble around, to gather enough experience to then turn it into something that's going to be useful to other people. So there is a huge value to the story that you have, and it doesn't take away from, how much good you can do in this moment. And it can be hard to remember when we're in it and we're comparing ourselves to everyone that's around us.
I know, because even in the course of this conversation, my mind's immediately going, most CEOs of the big unicorn startups are like in their 40s and their 50s, right? They're not young guys starting this stuff out, and it's why I think that like the mentorship is so powerful is because I know I get in my own way a lot. Like in the process of even just like having this conversation, I know I'm getting down on myself, being like, "Oh, I could have been doing it faster. I could have been doing this." And then hear you say that, and I'm immediately like, "No, Stephanie. Like, let me tell you about all of these things that are like of some guys that like are totally doing it with they're way older than me." And I'm like, "Hey, dum dum, do it for yourself, so I know that's what the power of this is, and so I know when I can really get into it with a person and kind of get into it like that moment, those changes, those questions can propel them forward past a lot of the nonsense and get them unstuck. And so when you ask, like, was there a Tyson for me when I was younger, the answer is no. And it took a lot of me just kind of like going through the morass and the muck, trying to kind of like just find my way. What am I doing? Spent too many years like in dead end retail jobs trying to like figure out that, oh yeah, you know what I'm really good at? Tech. And you know what I should do? Tech. And it took me way too long to be like, you know, I'm really good at, and like just pooped on all over my junior year because I didn't want to do it. Be a sysadmin. Yeah, I should probably go do that because I'm really good with computers. It just took a long time of getting them out of my own way and being like, no, I'm actually really good at this, and need to accept that I am good at this and actually enjoy doing this and need to go just do that thing. But, you know,
Yeah, yeah. And you've been doing this mentoring kind of entrepreneurially with your team within the
mhm.
organization that you work for. And so now kind of the transition that you're in is moving towards that entrepreneurial side. But what's the work that you have been doing in the mentoring program that you've developed within the work that you like your day job?
So I'm a manager by day. I'm a manager by day. So I really do consider it a manager. Well, a leader's job to grow those that they lead. And I do try to take that. And I can see your face reacting and nodding. A manager's job is to manage the work. Right. Here's what you have. Here's what you need to do. Here's the product. And here's the timelines we need to do it by. A leader's job is to grow their people, to teach. And I consider leader, teacher, entrepreneurial, kind of like in the Venn diagram of things, huge amounts of overlap. So where the friction's kind of coming in for me is I, as a manager in my role, am not supposed to develop my team the way I do. And I know there's very subtle reasons for that, and there's that I'm trying to loosely talk about. Most of them are contractors, and because they don't technically work for me, I am not supposed to develop them. I can't not develop people. As I said, I teach by default. So there is no like I look at that and I'm going to laugh at you. No, I'm not going to. If I have to talk to you at any point, I'm going to start mentoring you and trying to tell you how to be better. So the entrepreneurial system is me saying, well, can I take what I'm doing with you, like, and have shown good success out of? I've mentored a number of people into FTE roles at other big tech companies. I've mentored people into kind of like getting dreamed gigs at gaming studios. I've got one guy who's working on trying to become a photographer and join Top Chef. I've got another guy who is directing short films right now, and short films, and is working on trying to get his short film catalog built up to make feature films. Like, what I'm doing is not just a how do I be a sysadmin. I honestly find that to be the least interesting question. What I do, while interesting to me, is generally kind of boring. What is it that you really want to put out in the world? What big things are you really after? Because that is not necessarily what you're doing in the next couple of years. So it's, can I take all of that and can I take it to about, and I teach someone else how to do it, and can I teach other, and can I continue doing it with more and more people? So it's kind of trying to develop this. I wish I had a word for it, a framework or whatever. It's developing that framework, it's developing those ideas, and really kind of trying to spawn out those kind of that stuff into the world.
Yeah, and what's the journey that you take them on? Because I feel like you have like a specific set of books that you move them through and that
Mhm.
type of thing. So what's the actual process that you take your clients and your mentees through?
So as I said, a lot of it's still kind of being developed. The books are kind of in the books. I have this idea of 12 books that can change your life. And in theory, if I can ever actually get it written down, like I have them written down and I keep pondering with it, it should be my email magnet for signing it for my newsletter. And if you sign up and ask me for it, I will send you the draft, but it's still kind of like, it's still in progress. But the idea being is you're going to start with, and I will disclose a couple of them just because it makes it interesting. First one actually is Scott Shepard's Zettelkasten book. Is because you should understand, how do I write any of this down so I can recall all the information, the journey that I'm on. And then it's 11 books from there. And the idea being you read them about once a month and you write down and you think on these things. But they're very broad scope, right? It is, there's books on philosophy, there's books on leadership, there's a book on how do I be a man? What does it mean to be to be this, excuse me, king, warrior, magician, lover, which is the Jungian archetypes for masculinity. It's one of the books, right? And each one of those has their own kind of like, this is what it means to be a king. This is what it means to be a magician. And those and finding yourself in those roles and figure out where your weaknesses are. And you kind of walk through these books and readings trying to expand your mind. And the first question I end up asking people is the legacy question: who do you want to be when you die? Because my wife is the most insightful person I've ever met, and says how you die tells you how informs how you want to live. And so, if you know, because I've talked to guys that are like, oh, I'm in IT, I love what I do. I'm like, great, but what do you want to do when you die? Like, oh, I really want to be a photographer. Like one of my guys that I'm talking, right? I go, bro, why are you here? Like, why are you not going to do this? Like, you're so passionate about food and about and like photographing food and all that. And he's just like, yeah, you're right. No one had ever asked him, why are you not focusing on those things? So it's really the books are trying to get you to take an introspective look and a broad scope look and broaden your mind, because we get so focused on career and how do I make money and how do I do this, that we don't ever step back and say, well, what's my philosophy? What's my how do I speak to people? How do I get people on board with my ideas? I'm sorry, I'm mentally thinking through these books as we're talking, because it's been a while since I've looked at this particular list, because I read all of them a while ago. How do I bring people onto my ideas, right? Scott's really good at that, in the copywriting techniques and stuff. You're not going, we know, because we all signed up for this. I will pitch everyone and be like, yeah, no, come join us. Like, we're a crazy group of people. But how do you bring people onto your ideas? Like, I could ask you, how do you bring people into your dojo? How do you bring people to come teach from you, right? How do you explain that to someone else and bring me onto your ideas and bring that into yourself? I'm genuinely curious, like, how do you get someone to come learn from you?
Our focus is all on community involvement and being a community resource. So we've played around with the more traditional advertising thing. Actually, we keep talking about Scott Shepard, but he has a lot of background in that digital marketing. We have attempted to dabble in that in the smaller town that we're in. It's a little bit harder to make it work. And also, it just doesn't feel good to us. It just feels kind of, I don't know, it just makes us feel a little like slimy, or not even that you're doing something wrong. There's nothing wrong with sales and marketing. It's just a lot of people can use it in a manipulative way. And it's also not the work that we like to do. We like to help people to make genuine connections with others. So the way that we essentially market ourselves and encourage people to come check out what we do is by going to them and supporting community events. So marching in, the 4th of July parade every year in town, participating in town events. So like there's like a Celebrate Mansfield event that happens every year. We go to school fairs when they have those little fairs where they invite vendors in, and then we have a little demo team of kids that show up. And at all of these different events where we have booths, we're bringing our instructors with equipment so kids can kind of have the experience of learning how to do, the very basic stuff like a horse stance and a front punch. And then the other big piece of it is outreach into the schools. So we donate our time. We'll go in, we'll do after school programs. We have a Chinese New Year character development program. It's a cultural presentation centered around our experience, which is the Shaolin martial arts. So we share the story, one of the myths behind the Chinese New Year, but then along the way we give them ways that they can increase their focus and concentration in the classroom. So we're going out and just living it, demonstrating what we do. The word samurai translates basically to serve. So samurai there's a lot to samurai history, but the idea was that they were there to serve the community, and in return, the community took care of them. And that's the goal. That's the synergistic role that we've taken on in our community is just helping families. Our 3 pillars are community resource, family ally, and 21st century educational facility. So we get people to come in by giving back to them. It's kind of like that the saying we use all the time is drop a pebble, make some ripples. So we know that if we go out, do good stuff in the community, it's going to come back to us. The word's going to spread. That positive, smiley energy is going to spread. The lessons of confidence, of knowing how to protect yourself in a way where you're not escalating the situation, all of those things, kind of spread out like tendrils, and then people kind of get pulled in. The right people get pulled in, because not everyone's looking for what we do. And that's the other important part of demonstrating what it is you do very openly. We've had people show up to our school that literally want to get knocked around. Like there's, we've had guys like straight out of the military that are really excited to come in and just headbang. And we're like, there's this guy down the street, Seth, that does that. You should go to him because that's not who we are. And we actually had a dad one time come in with his 8-year-old daughter and like wanted her to get like knocked around because that was how he felt she was going to learn to defend herself. And we're like, nope, we don't do that. There's some, we can send you to someone else if that's really what you want. I wouldn't recommend it like
I have
for
so
an
many
8-year-old
questions for that
girl,
one, but
but
okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just our way of reaching out is by doing outreach, going out in the community and donating our time.
So to that end, kind of like to demonstrate kind of the point that I'm was kind of going with how long did it take you to kind of figure out that that was what you needed to do to demonstrate that marketing? Because when we talked about it, the first thing you said was, I've tried the normal things that felt slimy, that felt weird, and you figured out that demonstration was really your way of, and giving back to the community was really your way of doing those things. Because what I have found is most people I'm working with don't know, like I think of exactly what you think of. So which is that, oh, I can't people, like I don't want to market to anybody because I don't think my idea, like, because that feels slimy. So what did it take for you to kind of realize that community, that outreach was really what you needed to be successful in your business?
Yeah. Now, as much as they say we don't like the marketing part, we still do it because it's not our main focus, but you still do have to market yourself.
Of
That's a
course.
yeah, reality of business. So we're doing the social media thing and all of that kind of stuff. It's an I don't know that I have great advice for someone starting now because this methodology is something that grew from the early 90s when there wasn't the distraction of all of the digital stuff and all of those options and all of these online want to be entrepreneurial people bombarding you with their advertisement about how they can grow your business with through SEO or all of that kind of stuff. So it started with even before I joined, with the instructor that the person that owned the school before me doing the traditional marketing of radio advertisements, door hangers was actually relatively successful in the 90s, just running around town throwing hangers on people's doors of their houses. So it was doing all of that kind of stuff and not having the ability to do the digital marketing, which meant to get seen, you either had to do this, all of the traditional advertising like radio or print, or you had to get out there and actually have people see you and participate in these community events. So I think it grew from this grassroots place. And then as the digital came in, we experimented with it and then we paid attention to what felt good and what got results. So the ROI of how much do we have to invest and we are much happier investing our time and energy and positive influence than we are investing money. I know martial artists who they're really successful with doing the online marketing stuff and they're dropping thousands of dollars a month on it. I would rather drop hours of time in going out and actually getting to interact with kids and change lives than drop thousands of dollars on it. But then again, if we're investing energy in that direction, that means we're not investing the energy. We are still investing the energy in the classes, but people are going to want to invest that energy in different ways. So maybe someone likes teaching 25 hours a week, having maybe that's their how much they can handle in terms of that social interaction time. They like just teaching their classes and then they like spending the rest of the time doing the more traditional forms of advertising. For us, we'd rather spend 40 hours a week interacting with people than do, I don't know, play on Facebook.
I I think the part I'm kind of mostly after with that is the part that said this feels good to do this, and that's and we're seeing results, and that's kind of the part that was like, what made you land on that? Like that you're seeing results off of doing things in a particular way. It felt gross to do it this way, but it feels good to do it this way, and I think that's kind of what I was very interested in hearing. Is like kind of like what made you decide to shy away from those parts that kind of like, well, we could get results doing this slimy way, but I feel better doing this, and I'm getting results. And like, what made you decide to follow that, and that is the way you're going to do things?
Well, that comes down to tracking. So there's definitely the heart-based part of it of we like doing this thing better, but then the other part of is looking at and saying, okay, we invested this many dollars in Facebook advertising this month, and we did these 3 community events, and we
Mhm.
got more trials from the community events than we did from the paid advertising. So we like this other method better, and it seems to be working better for us in our demographic. So there's kind of this, there's the heart part of it, but then the thing that trips up a lot of entrepreneurial teachers is that they forget to bring in, especially if they're very heart based, they forget to bring in the cold hard analytics of what actually works. So if we had explored the Facebook advertising, and there's been a couple of times that we've dived into it a little deeper, if we had gotten results from it, we would have kept doing it, because bringing people into the dojo gives us more of an opportunity to positively impact their lives. But when we looked at the numbers, we get a better result, just whatever it is, whether it's the demographic or the way that we execute, we get a much better result by doing it the community way rather than by doing it the digital way. So as much as, there's the preference, when it really comes down to it as an entrepreneur, you got to look at the numbers, the cold hard facts of what works.
Yeah, you're completely landing on the like points that I'm making too, because that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Because I'm working with people that may struggle with that idea of I'm not only worth listening to, but like the idea of, oh, this feels icky to kind of the ways I think about marketing, like I don't like, but and you're fantastically making the point of, well, you don't have to actually do any of that. You can do the thing that feels good, like going out to the community and you're getting results. And I love the focus on the brain of kind of like, how do you the doing the analytical work after that. I also feel like I'm doing the thing that I do every time I'm in interviews, which is like making it more about the person that's interviewing me than actually answering any of the questions. But that's just because, and that kind of comes back to like, I really need to get into more interviewing on my podcast, because that way, like, come listen to the very interesting people I'm talking to. Because to me, I've lived my life. I'm like, I'm not that interesting. I know me. All right, you don't know me, right? So to that end, back to the books where we started with this one. So one of them actually is the Boring Letters, which was recommended to me by Scott, and it talks about how do you bring someone into your bringing someone into your ideas. How do you market to them in particular? So it actually ends up being one of the books I tell people to read, because you need to be able to bring people onto your ideas. And I was curious about, and why I started talking about you and what you were going with is because you don't have to, if you're not into writing direct mailers, which is what he was doing. You got Gary Halbert was doing. He's the most successful direct mailer marketing in the 80s, in the 80s and 90s. If that doesn't work for you, don't do it. But you still need to be able to bring people on your ideas and convince them of that copywriting, and getting anyone to think about it in that way. You can't change the world if no one's following along. So that's yeah.
Yeah, and we do, as much as we like to emphasize the other part, there is still that piece of it, the copy, the way that you're reaching out. So for example, when we do outreach programs in schools, this is another reason that we've kind of gotten creative beyond the typical. A lot of the schools don't allow for-profit businesses to advertise for very obvious reasons. You can't use this, the local elementary school to shill your stuff. So what we do instead
But Stephanie, I
is,
have loads of Pokemon cards that I need to unload. So you
yeah,
want to just come in?
right. So so what we do instead is we actually come in kind of under this slightly separate banner called Creative Connections. It's Creative Connections through the martial arts, and we offer the program, as a Creative Connections representative from the local martial arts school. And then we go in and we give them a what we learned today. So it explains to the parents, because kids go home and parents are like, "What'd you do today?" And they're like, "I got to do karate." And that's about all the detail that you get, if they even remember they did that, or have the energy to talk about it. So I know my son hates having to give recaps about stuff. He's just, it happened. He had fun. He doesn't need to relive it with you. Like, he's
Mom, don't
good.
worry about it. Come
So,
on.
So
I get that all the time with my kids. I get it.
yes, yeah. So what we did is we started sending them home with this what we learned today that had all the benefits-based language of like, they learned how to do a horse dance, which teaches you how to have confidence and stand your ground and all of those types of things and all of the different benefits. Even just learning how to do a front punch, you're actually helping synchronize the two halves of your brain so that you can focus better. So if kids if they were to if they're starting to feel fuzzy doing their homework, if they get up and they do that little coordination thing of doing the front punch the way we teach it, it's actually going to help kind of settle and synchronize those two sides of their brain. So now when they go sit back down, not only did they move a little bit, they gave themselves a movement break, they also did something that benefited their mind. So now they can focus better when they go back to their homework. So we call attention to all of the benefits beyond just karate is cool. It's a whole lot more than that. There's benefits that are going to extend beyond self-defense. It's going to help them be a better student, help them be a better person. So we call attention to that just in a little one-page sheet or a coloring book, depending on the format of what it is we're doing. We have these little what we learned today coloring books that have the same benefit-based language in them. And then our website is on the bottom. And, if someone goes to it, they go to it, but it's not like sign up now and get this special deal. And then we do have a trial because that as a marketing and sales technique, it's good to, let people come in and get a sample of what you do before they have to commit, especially when you're talking about kids, because parents can be nervous about their kids committing to stuff. So we do all of the things. We've just found ways to do it creatively where even the marketing that we're doing is beneficial and has the ability to change someone's life, even if they never engage with us beyond that one outreach opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my youngest son was like adamant for ages. I want to do basketball. And the minute we get there, he's like, nope. So I
Yeah.
totally get the free commitment. And I was like, we signed up. You've got 6 weeks of this. This is what we're doing. Deal with it. But that's me as a parent. And by deal with it, I meant like I was standing on the side of the court with him and trying to get him to dribble and like participating. I was the staff at the I9 Sports was like thought I was the coach because they were just like I was standing out in the court with the kid. I'm like, nope, I'm just a parent. This is how I get my kids to do things. It's just doing it with them. Anyway.
Yeah. And all right. So now I'm gonna turn it back on you. So I'd love to
Oh God.
hear maybe a couple of your favorite kind of transformation stories of people that you've worked with. You've alluded to a couple of pretty cool ones, but what are some things that you've experienced with the people you've worked with to this point?
So one of the first guys that I worked with, I'll just say we'll call him Jay. Jay was a young intern that came in through a program that was to help. I'll tell you the program because the program's called the Year Up because it's an amazing program. It basically gives you 6 months of IT training and then gives you 6 months of on the job, like working with people, working like at a company doing actual IT work. Amazing program. And so Jay came in through the Year Up program and was one of the first like interns I ever really got to work with. First time I've ever I've ever experienced this, like working with them. And the kid just had this like was 19 and had this just I'm going to go change the world, just let me go kind of energy. So all I really needed to do was make sure that Jay was pointed in the right direction, give him a gentle drop kick, and then like he was on his way. Right. Recently checked in with me. The kid has been through a number of jobs and just got an FTE position at a tech company and like tech company nearby, doing like incident management work and doing sysadmin stuff. It's been years of kind of working through this stuff. And so it was even like very early on in the process of just like, you just need to give them enough of a push, enough guidance. And this is before I developed the books, before I developed all this stuff. And so the transformations can really just be, where are you wanting to go? And getting him to, when I first started asking those questions, like, what are you going to do for the 40 years after that? Where he really had to sit back and think about it. And he was like, you know what? Because I asked him again recently, he's like, where is it? And he's like, I want a beautiful wife. I want a great job that I love. And I want to be able to travel. I'm like, fantastic. I think we get so caught up on like what the actual like title is and what the thing that I'm doing is that we kind of forget to step back into that big picture. So for him, when I got working with him, he's an intern making like, $10 an hour. He's like, I'm going to be the CTO of a mid-sized company or what, and I'm going to bring in those behind me and teach and give them opportunity and technology, much like I'm doing right now. I'm like, fantastic, Jay. You go, you go, right? Um, and he's doing it. He's working through those things. And I checked back in with him. I was like, how, like, he hasn't found the girl yet, but like he's working on it. But you can kind of get into like, well, who are you surrounding yourself with? What questions are you asking yourself? Are you reading? Are you challenging your brain? Are you growing yourself into the person you want to be to attract that partner, to make networking opportunities with the CTO, with the CEO that you need to become the CTO of that business? Are you reading about those things that you need to be focused on? So I said, I wish I had a framework that'd be like, just do the things and the stuff and kind of, whatever, and then you're great. But so that's one transformation. Another guy worked worked for me for a while, and we were working through stuff, and kind of like it kept being like, you don't love IT. Like, you're good, you're good at it, you can do it, but you're just not, this is not your passion. And then he was like, he with a contractor, so he got another job and came back and kept like checking in and kept working. And he's like, well, I really love film. This is the guy I was talking about, right? And so I'm like, then why aren't you doing film? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, bro, you work two jobs, like you make piles of money. Go. I gave him the 30-day challenge that you got from Scott or whatever, and I was like, go write 300. He's like, go write every day. He's like, yeah, okay. Came back, just checked back in with a couple literally 2 weeks ago, and he filmed his first full short or whatever himself. He's now in post production. Just from that little nudge of like, what are you actually wanting? I want to make films. Then go do that. Jesus Christ. So a lot of times I feel like my job is to literally just yell loudly at people and just to be like, go do the thing that you're telling me you want, and then hold the mirror back to them and say, this is you. This is what you're wanting. Go do it. I feel like I'm kind of like got off track of your question because I'm thinking of all my guys. So yeah, so Jay's got his new FT gig. He's starting in a couple weeks. I'm gonna check back in with him, and he's just on his way. Kay, the guy was in film, he's he's in post right now on one film. He's going to start up another film next year. And he's got like, just on their way, right? They're just doing the things that they want to do. So those are kind of the transformation stories. It's really just prompting people enough to kind of say, this is what you're wanting. This is what you're telling me. What are you doing to get there? And why aren't you working on that? That can sometimes be enough for people.
Yeah, no, and having someone to ask those questions can be a huge positive influence, and being willing to encourage them, from your heart, and see it in them, and then help them figure out, the answers to what they want to do to feel happy. My teacher used to say, our teacher John Fritz would say, keep asking bigger and better questions until the questions fall away and the answers reveal themselves. So you're asking them questions that really just boil it down to the answer that they needed, that was kind of hidden behind all of the clutter that we all have in their brains. So you kind of cut through that fog and revealed the thing that they knew, but they couldn't necessarily see. So I like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that you remind me of that belief, because during my 30-day challenge in August for my podcast, I ended up landing on trying to end my podcast by saying, I believe in you, my friend, because I needed to hear that from people. That there is that belief that you can accomplish whatever your goals happen to be. Of course, I'm speaking into the void, into the microphone that's literally in front of me right now. So I have no idea who I'm actually speaking to, but our friend Terry was kind of like, would talk about the kind of just needing a little bit of pep talk of kind of from someone, right? And just having someone's out there that believes in what you can do, and that you can accomplish those things. And sorry, I'm wanting to turn this on you. I've got and I know this is really about me, so I'm gonna have to have you on my podcast, because I got all kinds of questions about, well, where are you going? Where you got stuff? Because I want to ask you your big legacy questions. And I'm like, wait, no, this is Stephanie's interviewing me. Stop it.
Yeah, well, you're just demonstrating what it is you love to do and why you're good at it.
I can't help it. It's I will get better at this, but yeah, these interview things is because, like, to me, I'm the least interesting person. Everyone else around me is endlessly fascinating to me because I know how my own brain works. So it's not that I'm trying to shy away from being like, oh, don't pay attention to me, like some people that were like some mutual friends of ours, but who struggle with that. It's more of just like, I'm just more interested in hearing about you, and I think that's what makes me really good at this, is because I get into it and I'm like, well, why do you like, but I really want to ask you about, and please don't answer this because I know we will spend the next 20-45 minutes answering it. I really want to talk to you about Questor's Way. I know we've talked
Mm.
about it a little bit, and you're going, yes, and I know your audience has heard about it, and we were talking about it recently, but because I find you and your story about Questor's Way more interesting than anything I'm talking about. Like, and trying to remember all of the stories, these of the guys that I'm kind of like, that I'm kind of working with.
Yeah, well, so one of our other email magnets, to use like the marketing term that we have, that
Mm.
people get when they sign up for our newsletter, is the Ripple Maker program, which is
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you find a way to advertise essentially yourself and your business through benefiting others. So to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, every time that I interview someone, that means they're going to share my podcast with their network. And my partner is actually doing a similar thing, just on the blogging side of things. So he's doing Ripple Maker interviews, but then writing up a blog post highlighting that individual. So, and that's the kind of marketing that fills us up. It is definitely slower. You can there's lots of ways to get rich quick out there, but they're not going to be satisfying, and they're definitely not going to align with the people that we want to be in the world. So the
Mm-hmm.
the idea here is to, by highlighting you, then I also expose people to me, if I'm being honest about it, and that's it, and that is our favorite way to advertise and promote, because you cannot lose sight of the fact that as an entrepreneur, if you're just giving, 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 and you never ask for the sale, you don't have a business. There has to be this point where there's reciprocity in there. So we give as much as we can in a way that invites people to want to work with us and then support us so we can keep doing what we're doing. So we just feel more comfortable with this sort of cycle of reciprocity, rather than it being buy my stuff, and just yelling in people's faces and popping up advertisements, and having
Mm.
there's all kinds of techniques out there, like ethical bribes and all this kind of stuff, that just, like, I get it, I see it, but it's like one step away from being manipulation. And obviously, in any sales or marketing thing, you're trying to convince someone of something. So there's some level of what you could call manipulation in everything that you do. It's just a matter of keeping it in alignment so that it feels balanced and that both people are winning from the situation.
Mm.
So, yeah. All right. So I have a couple of kind of wrap up questions for you. So I've been
I like that
saying,
better than rapid fire.
yeah, no, they're not so rapid fire questions. But just to kind of bring it all to a close. So my first question for you is, what should people look for in someone who does what you do? So how would someone find a mentor? And especially, you've touched on it a little bit, but you do have, at the moment, you have a little bit of a specialization kind of thinking about young men, and that fatherhood idea, and how to become a good man, which I personally think is an important topic.
Yes.
There's been, there's the whole toxic masculinity thing, which is very true. But there's sometimes it feels like there's an imbalance where the way to remove the toxicity is almost to also remove the masculinity, and that's not helpful. We need to find a way to just strip away the toxicity. So
I
if someone's looking for a mentor that will help them be a good man, what should they look for?
The first thing they should be looking for is that they are making it about you. Like, it is not my story, as I've said numerous times, is not as interesting as yours. So I, as a mentor, my job is not to tell you this is how I did and this is how I solved it. My job is to listen to you and your problems, and then ask very deep, detailed questions about trying to help you through your particular issue. I'm very good at giving advice. I am trying very hard not to give advice, because that is not the purpose of this. Much like you can teach a kid to kick and punch, I can't actually kick and punch for you. You know, I would love to, because you'll be way better at it than I am. But if you could just do it, go ahead and do it for me, Stephanie. But You know how, so the first thing you need to be doing is are they making it about you, and are they asking you the questions that you're actually struggling with, and are they kind of, if you're finding yourself using the words dear God, it's like you're reading my mind, which happened to me recently, they're probably asking you the right questions, and they're probably talking to you about the things that you're really needing to wrestle, or really needing to wrestle with. Are they holding up a good mirror to you? Those kinds of, like, that kind of, that feeling of really feeling engaged and seen is really what you're after. And then you can kind of start wrestle the questions, are they a good man, are they kind of being the person that I'm wanting to be? Because I've never held anyone up too much. Part of the reason I've never really had a mentor is I've never looked at anyone saying, oh, I want to be just like you. I've never looked at celebrities. I've never looked at anyone and saying, oh, I can be like them, because then I can usually find something that I'm like, oh, I don't like this, or they're actually a giant monster, because that's what it seems like all celebrities at some point just become like some kind of criminal or something. I'm very broadly generalizing. The point is, you can find fault with everybody. So you're not looking to emulate them totally, but you're looking for them to leverage their talents and abilities to help you become the person that you're after, because we're all supposed to have our unique flame of the universe that we're trying to share with spark that we're trying to share with everyone. I'm realizing I'm kind of coding from my website without actually explaining to them. So to quickly summarize that one, I have a theory that we that we only there's one original thought in the entire universe, and that was what created the universe. The spark, the big bang, the big thing, and that those stardust, those shards expanded out into the world and exist within all of us. And our goal, our lifelong vision, is to uncover that within ourselves and share it with another person. So that is to say, there is no true original thought in the world. Everything is just uncovering those original thoughts and then sharing it with one another. When we are living within our true full selves, we're just uncovering that spark and sharing it with one another. So my goal and my job is to help you find your spark, your thing that you're trying to do to go change the world, uncover it and share it with one another. And I knew it'd take me about 50 minutes to get here, but finally woke up, and now we're at it. So we're gonna hit record, right?
Yeah.
uh,
No, that's beautiful though. I like that theory. I could get
but
behind that theory.
right, because I mean, like when we're all acting within ourselves, we're truly sharing ourselves with one another, and like that's when joy, and that's when beauty, and that's when everything kind of comes out and happens. So if you're finding someone that what you're looking for is someone who can really reflect that back to you, can help you uncover that spark, to help you feel empowered to go share that with the universe, that's what you're looking for. And whether that's me, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's an interesting way to talk about it. And I think it's also someone whose flaws you can kind of respect, because
Oh
none of
yeah,
us
no, I
are
like that.
perfect,
Yeah.
and yeah, because we are all flawed as humans, and some people you just have to pull a piece of and leave the rest behind, and then just move on with your life. But when you find that person where even e- the way that they react to being at their worst is still something that you can respect. Like the way that they recover from the mistakes that they made are something that
Mm,
you can respect. I think that,
yes.
yeah, that goes along with
Yeah.
what you were saying.
Yes, I like that. Take
Yeah.
what you Yes. Yeah, yeah. Well, if you like, even if you respect them at their worst, that is a good person to be learning from. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So next question. What is one thing that you would suggest to our listeners that they could apply in their lives today? So something, some piece of wisdom or an action thing that they could try out today.
I think I'm going to go back to just quoting my wife as probably one of the wisest people I know, which is like how you want to die informs how you want to live. So be thinking about big, broad questions. Really challenge yourself into be thinking about, like, who are you in the long term? Because when you start landing on what that is, your everything else is going to start crystallizing. You're going to start. The way I've put it to people is, when you think about your legacy, you're determining which mountain range you're in. And if you're trying to scale Mount Everest and figure out you're actually in the Appalachians, you need to go do some soul searching, because you're in the completely wrong continent. As I've said to some of the people I've even talked to that I've mentored, they don't actually want to be in tech, but they're in tech with me right now. How do you make steps to get to where you're actually wanting to go? And that is first and foremost done by
Oh, you muted
Oh,
yourself by
sorry.
accident. There you go.
Those are that's like figuring out how you so how do you solve those big legacy questions, and then how do you figure out which mountain range you're in. So the thing you can take away today is, who am I? Where am I going? And be thinking about those big things, and that will start informing you on where you want to be.
Yeah, and I can see that the next step is starting to figure out the plan of how to get there. Because just because you realize you're in the wrong space doesn't mean you drop everything
Oh
and
God, no.
spend all your money on a plane ticket. You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
gotta. There's
No,
a
but
the
that's
process. Yeah.
and that's when you start trying to find the mentors and start trying to
Yes.
figure out how do you how do you move on to those things. Because like the photography guy that I'm working with right now, there's a part of me that wants to just be like, you don't work for him anymore, go do the thing you actually want to do. But then he's now in the problem of like, how does he support his kid? So no, of course you don't drop everything and go run to that mountain range. You figure out, how do I get there slowly, and how do I build towards the thing that I'm wanting, and how do I become that person? Absolutely. But then that plan formulates as you're thinking. But to action item today is start asking yourself those big questions.
Awesome. And what's the most valuable lesson that you've learned through your entrepreneurial teaching journey? Big question, I know.
I think it's the concepts of legacy, and the ones I've been touching on is really kind of the big one that have been kind of keep repeating. But the big life's big lessons only really come in retrospect. When I discovered I wanted to be a father while drinking with a friend, and I looked at her and was like, you know what, I think I really want to be a dad. And she said, I think you'd be good at that. But it wasn't. I couldn't have said that was a life-changing moment at the time until I looked back at it in retrospect. So thinking about those big questions, you're probably only going to find the answers when looking in retrospect, and find those moments of change that will probably pass you by, like in the moment. I feel like I'm kind of like not trying to dodge your question, but I'm not answering it very well. So
Well, I
like,
think that's a concrete answer of using your past to inform your future
yeah,
and yeah, asking questions about your past is going to help guide you towards the direction you want to go.
yeah, Stephen Tobolowsky, who's an actor and has a fantastic podcast called The Tobolowsky Files. Oh, hey, we got there. I got a recommendation, and that happens like literally every time I talk to someone. Tobolowsky Files. Uh, he goes through stories of his life about kind of in his acting journey, and kind of and but one of the episodes I specifically remember is he was teaching an acting uh, an acting class, and he says you have to ask yourself why 3 times to find the root of whatever it is that you're talking about. And so I think in any story depends on where you start. Like any story that you're telling depends on where you start it from. So if you're trying to answer the question, like if you have to ask yourself, well, why did I want to be a father? It's probably going to take me 2 or 3 times of kind of thinking through, well, was that the first time? Was that the first time? Was that the first time I decided to want to be a dad? Before you kind of land on kind of what it is that you wanted to be. Because you can say like, while drinking with a friend, I wanted to be a father. That really wasn't the start of me wanting to start that journey. But you really have to but the story you're telling yourself really changes depending on where you're starting it. I completely lost my train of thought again. I'm just
That's
oh,
all
look,
right.
squirrel.
Yeah. So I have one more question, the most important question. How can people connect with you or find out more about what they do? You've mentioned your podcast a couple of
Yep.
times.
Yep. I have a podcast. I have a newsletter. I'm at tysonjhayes.com. You can subscribe there. You can find me on Spotify. It's the Tyson J Hay podcast. I apparently should probably upload to iTunes too, but I will get there. I get there eventually. And I will start a YouTube channel because everyone keeps telling me to start one. But then there's a whole of like, oh, I feel on camera, gross. But like, I know we're doing it right now, but it's just kind of, I'm not, but just the idea of like people actually seeing my face and talking to me, is just like, feels weird. And I'm dealing with that discomfort. So anyway, tysonjhayes.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter. If you do so, you can book a free 30 minutes with me for me to get to know you and ask you those really big questions and kind of figure out if we can work well together. I'm not trying to sell you anything. It's literally just me being like, I'm interested. I will genuinely enjoy spending 30 minutes talking to you about whatever it is that you want to say. So yeah, that's my thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I know people are going to get a lot out of this. And of course, keep being you, whatever you're doing, because you're doing awesome stuff.
Thank you. And I guess in return, I believe in you.